This conference will now be recorded.
It's one of those, I think for the new experience, not anymore.
We just finished the other day, which is that. They didn't move down there. So now.
Oh, yes.
Well, that's why I got all this money.
From the county administrator now, or?
What's showing that one? I have no idea. You have that one selected?
I'll have time, but I know somebody else that we don't have any. The county administrator.
So where do I get the whole?
Desktop application installed on this too? No.
There's different scenarios in there. How much you make for bounty? I guess.
Okay. Do you want advanced slides for you? Food work. I'd like to welcome everybody tonight to our community flood presentation. I want to thank you all for coming tonight. Our plan tonight is to kind of just give you an overview of where we've gone, the data we've collected, and kind of just give you a chance to see what's going on, where we've been, and kind of give you a chance to see where we kind of are intending to go with the process. Joe Lewis is here from Houston Engineering to go over the data and results from the study. We have members from the county. Chris Howard's here with the Ditch Authority. Doug Christopherson's here from the county. Eric's here on behalf of the city with the maintenance department. Myself, Shell's here with People Service, and a few others are here. Once we get done with the presentation part, I'd like you to let Joe get through his data and stuff like that, and then we'll open it up to some questions. We'll try to answer as many of those as possible. And then we'll kind of go from there and see what happens. If you have a question that you don't feel comfortable asking us in this setting, we're happy to take those questions after we're done with everything here. Joe will stay after and kind of answer those questions for you guys, and we'll kind of go from there. So that's kind of the way we'll handle it going forward. And right now I'll turn it over to Joe. Also, I just want to let you guys know we're going to record Joe's presentation tonight and put it online too. So anybody who is not here, who didn't get a chance to be here tonight, that will be online too, so they can see his part of the presentation as well. So
is that under the city of New Richland?
Or the city's website.
Okay.
Yeah, it'll actually be on our YouTube page. So with that, I'll turn it over to Joe.
Yeah, thank you, Tony. Thank you, everybody, for coming. So I'm going to spend, I think, 15 to 20 minutes just going through the details of our analysis and a report that we prepared and provided to the city. It's going to touch on, the analysis that we did. Well, I'll just get into the presentation, and then at the end, we'll open up for questions. So the introduction, we'll cover some background information on, stuff that you guys are pretty familiar with, I'm sure, to some degree, and then we'll look at, current conditions, what that system, what the drainage channel is meant to handle, and the current culvert crossings, what do those look like, and cover some of the project alternatives that we evaluated, and then give a summary on costs and some of the potential funding alternatives for implementing a project, and then talking what we think is going to happen next. Can everybody hear me okay? Good? Okay. If I taper off, let me know. All right, so there's about 10 square miles that drain through the city. That is largely coming through two different drainage systems that are managed by the County Drainage Authority. So that is Joint County Ditch 6 that, comes in from the east side, crosses Highway 13 through Culvert and continues to where it intersects County Ditch 47 towards the center of town. And then from there, it's 47 as it exits town and ends at Highway 30. Okay, so like I said, 10 square miles, not a huge area, but not a small area either. Next slide. So, the first thing we did was really look at framing, how big, how much water can the current systems handle. Okay, so we did an estimate of, what's the flow rate? So what's the volume of water that those things can handle before the ditch is full and it starts coming out of the bank. So it varies through town, and there's different size of ditch, different size culverts. So we've kind of framed things here as a range. So there's 400 to 600 cubic feet per second, or CFS, that can move through the ditch until it starts to come out of the ditch and cause problems, first in low-lying areas, and then eventually it starts impacting structures. And that is that's the flow rate that's generally associated with a 3.5 to 4.5 inch amount of rain in a day. And that corresponds to generally a 10-year event. So there's a 10% chance that kind of rainfall is going to hit the watershed every year. Next slide. And I just have a couple figures to go on that a little bit more. There's 2 crossings here that I've just selected just to give a representative image, and you guys see these. But at Aspen Avenue, there's a double barrel reinforced concrete box culvert, or RCBC. So that has a certain opening associated with it, and therefore it corresponds to how much volume, how much water can it push through there. And the slide before was 400 to 600 CFS. Right? That's our rate that the system can handle. And then on the lower right image, that's the railroad embankment. There's 2 72-inch corrugated metal pipes there that have slightly less capacity than those box culverts. And the thing about those is that there's more height, there's more difference in elevation between the culverts to the top of the road or the embankment where it would start to overtop. So when we look at the current condition, we see on a slide here coming up, we're going to look at a difference of how the map floodplain changes through town. Next slide. And I included this slide in here too, just to make sure I covered the size of the ditch, because that's very important. We see it being 8 to 10 feet wide at its bottom, and then the slopes go up, generally 5 to 8 feet. Again, that varies through town, and that correlates to how much water can it move. A deeper ditch carries more water, of course. A wider ditch carries more water. But this is what we're seeing. So that number of 400 to 600 CFS, that I'm trying to capture both the size of the channel and the size of the culverts, just to give us a frame of reference. Slide. And so we took the information about what size the channel is, what size the culverts are, put that into a computer simulation model, and put a flow rate, which I'll cover in a second. We put that water into the model, and we get predicted flood elevations through the entire stretch of town. We're focusing on that open channel ditch that enters in from the east side and goes through to the west side. So you see, east of the railroad embankment, we have a big blue blob, and then on the west side of that railroad embankment, we shrink down. We're narrower. I think the ditch is generally getting deeper there. It's getting a little steeper, so we're carrying more water before it pops out of the bank and floods. We're on the east side of town, near the highway crossing. There's low-lying ground there by the ball field, so that shows up as pretty wet. When I talk about how much water can it handle, we're estimating here for a 100-year flood elevation. So that's a bigger event than a 10-year elevation that gives us that lower flow rate. So the 100-year elevation, 100-year flood event has a 1% chance of being exceeded on an annual basis. And the amount of rain that takes, that's correlated with that type of event is 7.7 inches in a 24-hour period. So we've taken some existing data and published reports and used that to predict what we think that 100-year flow rate is for the 100-year event. And that is double to triple that 10-year flow rate of 400 to 600 CFS. I think our 100-year flow rate is right around 1,200 cubic feet per second. So we are trying to, ultimately what we're trying to do with a project alternative is to contain that water in some way, not let it pop out of the banks and impact things. So, this blue area, this is our predicted elevation. We've done a couple things to, try to verify that this is accurate, because ultimately, when you look for money to help build a project, or if you're going to design a project, you want some verification that your computer model that you're using to analyze and design is giving you some reasonable results. So, I'll just point out that I think we show more flooding extents on the east part of town than you've experienced, than you've seen. And I'm not going to go into a lot of depth in that, but just know that we've kind of looked at things from a big picture level, and there's some things that you might notice that don't necessarily correlate to what you've seen, and that I think would be addressed here in the future. So on the next slide, I just want to touch on some of the past bigger flood events that you've seen, that you may have seen. So we did compare from that computer model that was telling us what our flood elevations were corresponding to a 100-year event. We wanted to check and see, well, how did that compare to the larger events that you've seen? So I said the 100-year event, based off of years and years of recorded precipitation data, there's 7.7 inches in a 24-hour period. So remember that number, 7.7, and that is based on that information that is analyzed and published by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Agency, if I got that right. So they've looked at all these records and said, 1% chance for a 100-year event, you're going to have 7.7 inches of rainfall over 24 hours in this area. Just keep that in mind as I talk about these other events. 2010 and 2016. So in 2010, this area, to the best available information, says that you got between 6.9 and 8 inches here in the southeast part of Waseca County. This image that I'm showing is taken from a publication from the USGS, or U.S. Geological Survey. They published a report. It was such a big event. They said, we're going to do a report just on this event to document it so that we understand the severity of the event. So I don't have an arrow, but so New Richland, we're down here, and we're in this kind of light purple, so that's 6.9 to 8 inches. And this is based on radar data, NexRad radar data from the Weather Service. They do calibrate it by actual precipitation gauges to adjust it to give an accurate estimate of the rainfall. So there's areas that were, 10 plus inches in Amboy, and just north there's that next shade darker of purple, and that was an 8 to 10 inch range. So it's a lot of rain. And in the next slide, we have a similar graphic. This time it's in a report published by the Minnesota DNR State Climatology Office that shows, again, rainfall depths. We're in the southeast part of the county. This is the second shade of blue. So again, we're in the 6 to 7 inches of rainfall. And that is, I think, the entire storm event, which exceeded 24 hours. You know, it was heavier at times and lighter at times. And then there is actually on the National Weather Service site, there is individual rain gauge report of 7.7 inches in the city of New Richland. It says WI, that means Wisconsin, but they give coordinates, latitude and longitude, that is here in the county, in the city. So that radar estimate 6 to 7, but we have that point rainfall gauge data of 7.7. So we actually have some events that are comparable to the 100-year event. And I don't have the slide in the presentation, but we did make a comparison. So predicted flood elevations from our computer model to, well, it was a combination of photos that the city had were provided to me, and I think, you know, there's that nice Sportsman Club website that has photos. We took a look at those and, you know, approximated real elevations from those and compared computer model results to those measured elevations. And like I said, you know, we were actually coming in a little bit higher than what was observed from those two floods. So I think that's probably enough on that. Next slide, we're going to start. Well, before we talk about the different project alternatives, I wanted to talk through this a little bit. It's a lot of words out there, but the 100-year event is, you hear that maybe more than anything else when you talk about floodplain management and flood mitigation. There's one main reason for that. So the National Flood Insurance Program that is administered by FEMA, that was created in the 70s, and it's, you know, available across the country. The community must enroll in that program to have their 100-year floodplain mapped. And then there's, you know, mortgage and lending kind of requirements that go along with that, and homeowners insurance or flood insurance. So they use that 100-year event to, you know, draw a line on a map to say you're in the 100-year floodplain or you're out of the 100-year floodplain. You're in it and you have a mortgage, or for most types of mortgages, you need to have flood insurance. The bank requires it. If you're outside of that boundary, you don't need flood insurance, but you can still get it. So there's communities that design projects to get people out of the 100-year floodplain. And this is in, you know, the federal regulations that a 100-year event a project must be designed to effectively remove properties from the 100-year event. So, you know, there's different factors that go into, you know, what you're going to design a flood mitigation project for. And there's also different safeguards. Like you're gonna have some additional, you know, I use the analogy of a levee. So if you're going to build a levee to protect structures from a flood, you're going to build your levee to the height of the 100-year floodplain plus 3 feet, right? So that gives you some cushion. You know, maybe there's some waves or erosion that happen. You're not going to be, you know, on a razor thin margin of error. And that's actually in the federal regulations that to be removed from the floodplain, you need that 3 feet of freeboard and to tie into high ground on either end of the levee, things like that. So when we are going to talk here about the effectiveness of different flood mitigation projects, we've looked at it through the lens of that 100-year event. How effective is it at the 100-year event? Because that really is the standard that's out there for how you're going to design a project. But having said that, there is, you know, other things to consider, and, you know, this is in our report, but we actually say, you know, you should probably look at what are climate projections. There's studies out there that say, you know, we've seen changes in our weather patterns, our precipitation patterns. So our 100-year event, that is 7.7 inches of rainfall right now in 24 hours. You know, what if it's 8? What if it's 9? And actually, I think it's like a 14% increase is what kind of the combination of studies on average say it's going to increase here in, I don't know, by 2040 or 2050. The 100-year event rainfall used to be 6.5, 6.25 inches, but that was updated across the country here about 10 years ago. So that was kind of a big national effort, and that was done to give people like me, engineers, kind of an updated design standard. So when we look at a 100-year event now, it's more water than it was 10, 15 years ago. Right now, we're going to start talking about just an overview of the different kinds of flood projects that we took an initial look at. So, number one, it's kind of obvious. It's to make the culverts bigger. Okay. And then a combination is you make the culverts bigger and you make the channel bigger. We specifically analyzed a wider channel. It could also have been deeper. You kind of get the same effect there, but there's some differences. And then we looked at two diversions. One is rerouting the County Ditch 6 channel around the north side of town and tying in again to the ditch on the west side of town. And then similarly with the County Ditch 47 drainage system, just taking that directly west on the south side of Highway 30. So just to completely go around on the south side of town. And then, property buyouts are an option. And then structural protection, levee, and or flood walls, flood walls are just, it is what it sounds like. It's the wall that protects you from flooding. And we looked at those again from kind of we didn't design every alternative in a detailed way. We're just looking for like what's going to look like the best alternative, what has the most impact here in terms of reducing that 100-year floodplain in the areas that are currently subject to that flood risk. So this is results from the increased culvert and only increased culvert scenario. So the orange is the existing floodplain, blue is the reduced floodplain. So you see there's a good impact on that center or east part of town between Highway 13 and the railroad. But there's still buildings, properties that are at flood risk. So the structures there, we kind of have outlines. Pink are the ones that are outside of the floodplain, and then the green ones are in the floodplain still. And now the next slide, we have the alternative where we replace culverts and widen the channel. So that blue teal strip through the middle, that's our widened channel width. And we still see that we have, if we flip back and forth, we can maybe see a change in how that blue area is shrinking just a little bit more, but it's not a lot. So with that channel widening, we run into the issue of the channel that now is 30 to 50, maybe 40 to 50 on average wide at the top. We're gonna maybe double the width of that channel because as we widen at the bottom, we need to be flat enough with our side slopes, and in reality, you should not have structures right immediately adjacent to the channel. I think that makes sense. So there's going to be some impacts, and unless you realign the channel and avoid structures where you can, and we highlighted several structures there that just at first glance widen the channel equally on both sides. You're going to hit some structures, so those are highlighted in red, and there's I think 7 or 8 of them. Next slide. And now this one, we're looking at a northern diversion alignment. So we're intercepting the majority or all of the flow that's coming in from the County Ditch 6 channel. We're taking it north around town and coming back on the west side. So here we see the most impact on how much we've shrunk that floodplain. Most, but not all structures are out of it. We still have some that are on the west side of town that we're just not able to capture enough water to really keep it in the channel still. But this is pretty effective. We can size the channel for for what it needs to be. And we're intercepting, I think 60 to 70% of the drainage area. That's what comes in of those 10 square miles, capturing 6 or 7 square miles as the ditch is coming to Highway 13 there. And the remaining flood risk is, coming from County Ditch 47. We're not touching that with this alternative. And there's still, some drainage from inside the city.
So those, excuse me, so them that have been highlighted in the paint. What is that?
Those are the ones that are now out of the floodplain.
I missed that. Okay.
Yep. The green ones are still in or touching that mapped flood area.
Okay.
And, again, this is, the problem with this alternative is that we still have green structures. We have unprotected structures. So, a plan would need to be developed for if this northern diversion is what looks the best. You still need to figure out that piece of the puzzle. And, it's either, through additional kind of technical work, I think we could say, is that are those really still in the floodplain? Do we have this? Is this right? Or is there actually things going on that would put those out of the floodplain? Or maybe it's a smaller amount of channel widening or culvert improvements on the western portion of the channel. So there's things like that. We just weren't able to get all the way through at this stage. The next slide is, there's not much to see here. This is for the southern diversion, where we are taking that County Ditch 47 tile that is, going near the school and outletting into the ditch north of Highway 30. We don't show an alignment or a route for it, but we just had this scenario where we take all or most of that water from the County Ditch 47 watershed and take it away from town. Don't let it get into town. We take it to the west. The reason this isn't more effective is, we're not diverting as much water. It's a smaller area that we're taking away from the city. So we just didn't see a lot of impact there. And, if you remember, we're wide floodplain on the east side, narrower floodplain on the west side. So we're taking a water away from that west side where there is less risk, or there's less of a floodplain to shrink. And, okay, so these are some, planning level cost ranges we put in there for alternatives, and things add up pretty quickly. Culverts only would be the lowest cost option, but we saw that it didn't itself solve a lot of things. Increased culvert capacity and channel widening, that gets more expensive. That's the most expensive ones listed there, but with the exception of buyouts, which isn't a real feasible option in my opinion. So we see $4 to $5.5 million generally. So there we're replacing culverts and doing a lot of earthwork and relocating some structures or moving some structures too that were in that footprint of the widened channel. Northern diversion, we're in that $3 to $4 million range. So again, that's earthwork, that's new crossings, you're gonna have a ditch that crosses existing roadways. And southern diversion is so far conceptualized as large diameter tile, big pipes that carry the water, through the hill there and outlet it into the ditch when it can. And then the buyouts, is a really rough estimate, taking the number of properties in the big map floodplain and assuming a price.
If you do that diversion on there, you keep the old channel there too. The water goes through that as well.
Yeah, I think that would be, you'd need to do something with water that would, from rain from within the city. Yeah, so I think you would need some kind of, channel or big storm sewer pipe to take its place or whatever. But, that channel, using the existing channel would be the low hanging fruit on that. Just one main thing on funding, the city and county have been discussing and looking at, what are options to go out there and get funding. Those are big amounts that we had on the previous slide. The one thing that, we've dug into the most so far is the state of Minnesota has a flood hazard mitigation program, and it's there's an application. You submit an application request for funding to the DNR, and they prioritize it, and then they allocate that money, but it's dependent on the legislature giving money to this program annually. So they look at their prioritized list of applications and move forward. So, that's one opportunity. I know that there's other things being considered, and that particular program has distributed almost 600 million since 1987, and know that there is a local contribution. In this case, it's capped, based on the size of the community, which would be a good thing. And I think I'm going to stop there with funding, and because I don't really have a lot more definitive information at this point. And this, I think, is my last slide, but just to try to capture what are some potential next steps here. So the city and county are putting their heads together and seeing, how they can collaborate and what works best in terms of, who leads what and how does it put the community here in the best position to be ready to go after that external funding, and then, if successful, how to get a project done. And, a few things from a technical perspective. Things were pretty high level here. We did analysis. We did a computer model. There's quite a bit more detail that needs to be done before you're both selecting kind of a final alternative, determining what that all looks like and what it needs to be successful, and then a design. So I don't have any more slides, correct? Or I just have a blank one there, I think. Yeah. So we'll do questions, but if you want to ask questions afterwards, we'll stick around. Okay.
Go back to slide 2.
Tony, do you have anything else to jump in and say, or?
Not at the moment. No.
Okay.
You're talking this one, Rose?
Show some flood alignment stuff. That one. Okay, I live down here. There's a culvert underneath the railroad tracks. In June, I had 6 feet deep water in my backyard. 2016, half of my backyard was underwater, and it would have ended up being 12 feet deep at the railroad tracks. Why is that not part of this blue area?
Yeah.
Because it affects 5 properties along here.
Yeah. So the area that we show as mapped, the flooding source is the ditch. We're not individually analyzing the different pockets of low areas or depressions that are spread throughout the city.
My water comes from farm field on the other side of the railroad track.
Okay. And does that come through either County Ditch 47 or 6 before it floods on your?
Okay, 13. On the west side of 13, there is a piece of farmland, and that gets flooded, and then that comes right underneath the culvert and affects 5 yards.
Yeah. So I don't have a great answer other than, the type of analysis we did at this point is not going to capture every corner or every pocket of flooding that has been observed. In a further design phase, if there's a storm sewer or a culvert project or replacement increase in size that can resolve that, it should be looked at. Storm sewer is typically sized to handle a 10-year event, that 4 or so inches of rainfall before it starts to pond. Not to say that nothing should be done to address bigger flood events, but that's what the typical design criteria is for a storm sewer.
Well, the thing it is, okay, the railroad tracks are abandoned, so, but yet culvert should, and the track should be addressed to the actual railroad. They do nothing. And so, and by state law, you can't close off a culvert. So,
Yeah, that's a flood risk. You've seen it. That's a flood risk, and I think that would be looked at in more detail in a later phase.
I made it
design
earlier
phase.
stuff.
well, the thing that is, when I bought 2013, I was never notified that there had been water back there. And then you, that much water in 2016? I mean, for me to try and sell my property, it's gonna be tough because people aren't gonna deal with that. And at being 70 years old, you know, what am I supposed to do?
Do you know anything of the street plan that we got in that area? When that's finished, would that take storm sewer water away from that area and help with this plan in the future?
Yeah.
The whole thing?
Yeah, so I'm not familiar with if any street projects are happening, but if there's, is there some storm sewer work associated with that?
We haven't even, that's been, those have, we haven't even discussed, we haven't discussed that with Joe Hardley at all, but,
It really,
Is
it
it
needs to
possible
be.
that it could affect?
yeah, it'll dramatically affect that. So Broadway and Aspen are doing a complete street repair with full sanitary, storm, and water, all the way from all the way from Highway 30 all the way to 4th Street. That first 3.5 blocks.
So
That'd
will
be
that,
all.
so will that, I live on, the dead end on Boston Avenue South on the west side.
Okay.
And okay, so every time we get a rain, not even necessarily, it doesn't have to be 7.7 inches, even less than that. The field floods, there's a valve, and Wackles owns that, and all the crap from his field comes in our backyard. So we had literally, we bought the house in 2005. We literally had waves. We had just finished the basement. We had waves. We had a walkout basement at the time. Lovely. It was great until it wasn't. And waves flooded our basement. We lost everything down there. So that gut job was $15,000. Not one penny of that was covered by anything.
Yeah.
No, but supposedly now we can. But
Not for the flood.
right, it's a whole different scenario there. And anyway, so this is not. So we took out that walkout basement, we brick blocked it, and that has helped a lot. But we still get that water from that field, and everyone else is fine and dandy. And we've got a lake. I mean, seriously, we call it Hines Lake. Literally, we call it Hines Lake. I take pictures, live documentation. I contact the Attorney General. I'm done dealing with it. Nobody wants to do anything about it. The stuff is corroded under the streets. It needs to be fixed. And anyway, that's probably a whole other day, but just to bring it to your attention that something needs to change there. And I'm sick of it. And it takes weeks for that to get out of our yard.
Weeks, sometimes a month.
Yeah, oh yeah, for sure.
I think it's the whole town.
I'm sure a lot of people have that issue,
Tony, can I ask you to go back to the northern route thing,
but it's just ridiculous and nothing's been done.
to the prices of each plan after that? I'm curious if we could look at developing a plan where if we do the northern diversion, what if we take some of that money from the plan that says to do the culverts and widen the ditches and do some of that? Because I think everybody in this town knows them two culverts stop shipping. They need to be replaced. If they were replaced with that, along with the northern diversion, keep the west side or the east side of 13 and near the care center, a lot less water in there. Those two plans work together.
Well, I'm not going to speak for everybody, but I think that the thought process that we've had is that it's going to be a combination of those two things. I think the thought process that we've had as a committee is that a northern diversion as well as a deepening and widening of the channel and some culvert replacement in town is probably the best avenue. And those two things together is probably going to take care of, I don't want to say 90%, but I would say the majority of those events that were to happen.
You know that one watershed where they're talking about drought, where wetlands and property owners have water that comes into town from the southeast and the south and the east, that if some of those farmers phonied up with letting DNR or whatever put in either earthen dams a little bit to slow the water coming out of town, yes, it may stay on their land for 3 or 4 more days longer, but if everybody phonied up something, I think that would help these plans a great.
But that is a voluntary only program.
Correct.
Well, I was at a meeting, I think it was 5 years ago, we had another talk about all this. And nothing's gotten done. And I know Merlin Boland was here, he's gone now. He said those culverts at the west end of town are way too small. They are. To carry what's coming in from the east. So why hasn't something been done about those?
On the west end of, I am on the west end of town. And I'm built up a little bit. I don't have a sump pump or nothing, but the water does not reach the banks, so it is getting through town.
Yeah, but it's also wearing away the side.
It's backing up somewhere else upstream. The 7-10 inches of rain in 16 or this year, I haven't reached the banks. The only time Doug had to come over during the winter when the ice was on the creek. When it rained and dislodged, that's when I got the most water on my property. The water does not break the banks on the west end of town.
Yeah, but it's also eroding around the edge.
Just telling you, I've lived there for 10
it's
years.
flooding before it's before you.
Yeah.
Before you.
I'm by Margaret Anger's old house, but farther down.
Yeah, it's before you.
It doesn't get that deep right there. But
Yeah.
maybe
The water's all held back, that's why.
Yeah, but funeral home.
yeah.
Yeah.
Right up that the big market.
Very simple.
Why does it take so long to get something done? I mean, this was 5-6 years ago that I was at a meeting like this.
Well, how well, I can tell you why. Where are we gonna, where is this coming from? I mean, that's the problem.
There gotta be some grants available.
You're right.
There's gotta be grants.
You're right.
Just kind of looking.
I understand that, and we have written many planning grants and everything else, but this is millions and millions of dollars, and you have to have this level of work, this technical work data done before you can get these grants. That's why we've gone this route to get this stuff done.
When was the last study? 2016?
The city of New Richland has never done a study.
I know there was a study. Did the county do it?
The county did their own study, but not anything to do with the city of New Richland.
Yeah, and I can give my background on that. I was involved with the previous study that I think wrapped up in 2021 or 2022. That was
I thought it was in 2016 or 18.
that one I'm not familiar with, but there was previous work, but the county applied for a grant from the Board of Water and Soil Resources from the Clean Water Fund. That's the sales tax, 3A sales tax. So that that revenue is, distributed out to the DNR for parks and trails and easements for conservation. It also addresses water quality. So the county had applied for a water quality focus grant. We did some watershed analysis upstream that focused on water quality impacts for the downstream resources, for the Minnesota River, for the Sioux River. We also were able to look at storage projects, some of the larger storage projects upstream of the city, because those have a water quality benefit. We also looked at what if we really emphasize that the water retention, the storage from a flood. And so that was like a secondary part of that study. The outcome was that you need to hold back a hell of a lot of water to like take homes out of that floodplain, right? You need to hold back like 2/3. If you remember those numbers, you can handle 400 CFS now, well, you're getting 1,200 when it rains a bunch. So you need to hold back 2/3 of all that water from a flood event so they can slowly meter out over weeks, over days, or weeks or months, So that assessment said, storage, it's helpful, but it's not going to help a whole lot when you get 7, nearly 8 inches of runoff. So that report was wrapped up. I think it's the county and SWCD that have that, and they've maybe done some landowner engagement, but to my knowledge, there hasn't been any traction with building anything.
Water held back now because you have those 2 small bridges on the west side of town. Make bigger bridges or get rid of the water. You won't have it backed up.
Yeah, can you explain that a little bit more when you say there's little impact putting bigger culverts in? I don't understand that at all.
Well, yeah. You don't go back to I don't know what slide it is, but I think it's
this one right here.
Well, no, it's the next set of map figures. The first one right there, I believe. Was that say? Well, this is with culvert replacement. So we're replacing every culvert in there to essentially match what is through Highway 13. I think those are 10 by 8 diameter or 10 by 8 dimensions.
Can you quickly go back to the one where it has the most amount of floodplains so we can compare this one to that one?
Don't do that yet, because that's the orange here. That's the orange. That's what we're saying, existing 100-year floodplain, and the blue is the reduced from the culvert replacements. Yeah.
Oh, that's a fair amount of blue there.
It is. And the reason that we see the difference where we do is that the railroad embankment with that height above the culvert, that's acting as that quasi dam. It's throttling back the water.
Well, what happens if they just pull that damn culvert completely out of there because the railroad don't go through?
Well, something like this. It would be.
Well, that's what this is, because
Essentially.
that's what we talked about, is not putting a culvert in there, opening that up basically and leaving that open until the railroad said we would have to put something back in there, basically. Yes.
I presume that where it turns west, they're north of the soccer plant. Is that right?
That's the biggest problem.
Yeah, funeral home. That if you took out the railroad culvert and made the other one bigger, wouldn't that push a hell of a lot more on there? And when it's got to turn, it's going to start ripping shit out.
That's the biggest problem.
Well, then we might as well rip it down. Right, top. The diversions of the top.
Yeah, if you do that, you're dealing with the water the runoff that's coming from within the city, and then the southern.
And if you took the culverts out and didn't do anything with the depth or width of the ditches, that might make it so it wouldn't hurt that curve there, but still push a little bit more water out of town faster and going around the north, pull it out that way instead of coming through. Well, between the two, like I said, maybe you're gonna spend 5 million again.
Yeah, there's a lot of different combinations that, can be looked at. We drew a line somewhere, but, there's lots of good things being thrown out.
But if not, why go north instead of going south?
Yeah, so I think the topography, there's a larger hill that you would go through. And if you avoid it, you're adding length. I think around the north side, we have about two full miles that you would dig a new channel. On the south side, you can be a little shorter if you take the most direct path. Or actually, I don't know if you'd even be shorter.
Wasn't there much of an effect when you used the southern route?
Well, if you take,
He's saying instead of diverting the current channel north, diverting it south.
yeah, instead of
Right, but
here going that way
But isn't diverting it north have a better effect on the flood water than diverting it south?
What he's saying is instead of diverting the ditch north, doing the same thing with the water just going south with the channel.
Yeah, that would help those people on the.
He's saying this just moving the water just in the ditch, not going around the north, going around the south.
like you're breaking off at the same point on the east side of town, but
Not doing the southern diversion. It's the northern diversion is just putting the ditch on the south.
So I think the answer is you end up with a longer ditch a longer channel that you're building. So it would be more expensive. But there is some other, reasons to consider that though.
It would definitely help.
Can't you
people
crunch the
on
numbers
south
and see
end
how
of town.
much for?
Yeah, you can.
Because, I mean, we hate to throw it away if we don't know a number, just be saying it's gonna be more.
Yeah.
Yeah, 47.
So how long is this gonna take before something gets done? We can talk about this for years and years and nothing gets done.
Yeah. So, I mean, I've done the kind of the scope or the amount of work that was requested, and we're kind of completing this phase with this informational meeting. So I guess from here, it's determining how best to keep going if there's a good option and keep looking at some other alternatives or some alternatives. That's the next step.
Can we start
Time
with the
frame.
grant application? Is that
Well,
done?
that's why we're having this meeting, is because we have to kind of narrow down which option we have to choose in order to buckle down to make that grant application. Okay.
It's that decision.
That's why we're talking to the community to try to figure out what people want to do.
I want to make a comment. I think you had a question over there too. But we've talked with the DNR, the administrator of the flood hazard mitigation program. They accept applications anytime, and they put you on their prioritized list depending on where you fall in that list. So their factors are, how big of a problem do you have? How have you demonstrated or documented your problem? What are your plans? Like, what are you going to do about it? They don't want you to come and say, we don't know what to do. You tell us. They don't want to hear that. They want an applicant, a community that knows what their problem is and knows generally what they want to do. They just need that money to design and build it. So this study has advanced. Like, you've gotten closer to that milestone where you're going to be able to go to the DNR or somebody, say, this is our problem. We've documented, we've defined it. We kind of know right now what things are going to work, what alternatives are looking better, and some things that aren't looking good at all. Like we've scratched a few things out. So I don't know. You've made some progress, but that next step is to really button up a conceptual plan, a preliminary plan with a cost associated with it that you can go, we need this, and this is what we're going to do with it.
How much are the taxes gonna go up too?
Depends on the grant. If we can get grant coverage,
There's also we've talked about the design and construction grant. There's also grants to do analysis similar to the one a couple of years ago. But there's now, a newer one that the state has recognized. There's they call it always climate resiliency. It's not flooding, it's climate resiliency. So there's some grant funding coming up for that category, which could be used to, further analyze and move towards that selection of a alternative. Yeah.
I think another way to do it is I'm pretty sure everybody knows somebody that either is a friend or a family or a neighbor or a legislator. Poke that legislator in the ass. Say, hey, man, we need some money out here. And I think the more people they get telling them that, they might put some money aside or at least come and talk to us.
Well, and I probably should have said that and I didn't, and I apologize, but I have been in contact with Tina Smith's office. She's her Southern Minnesota person, and I had sat down and had a very nice conversation last fall about this project, and she's very happy with this project, and it's on their radar to work with. I know that Commissioner Christopherson and them have been in contact with what's Brad's Bidstead's office. Peggy Bennett has been in contact with me over this project already. So our local legislators are very aware of what's going on, and they're very wanting to help us with this project. And so having this step ready to go, we're on their radar, ready to go. So I mean, we're making that progress that we need to make. We just would need to finalize these outcomes so that the council can, set this in motion and get these things going. So that being said, I am applying for these planning grants so that we can get the money to finalize these studies out of the way without as little cost to the taxpayers as possible. I'm writing grants on a pretty regular basis, actually. So
if you go with any of these and it goes through, are you gonna let more farmers come into that drainage? That's a big problem on the east side because you have the farmers that you let come into that ditch.
Amen. That
Amen.
causes
Amen.
a big problem. Yeah.
Yeah,
We kind of fixed it.
and we can tell them farmers, no, you cannot do that.
Chris, do you want to explain that process and explain?
Good luck with that.
Well, do you want to explain the drainage authority and why it's no different than the city building houses and stuff like that?
So a public drainage system is a statutory drainage system that is established by a county or county board. And what that means is that you have a watershed, and a county ditch, county tile is constructed, and it is meant to serve all of the people in that watershed. Meaning that if you lie within that watershed boundary, that you have the right to use that for drainage of your property, whether that is a 80-acre farm field or it's a 4-acre paved parking lot within the city of Richland. So it is very sticky when we talk about saying, we're going to limit people in the amount of drainage that they can put into a system that they pay for, because you all pay for it, whether you're a resident of New Richland or you're an ag producer outside the city limits. So the short answer is no. We cannot restrict people in their use of that drainage system because they are entitled to use it, because they pay for it through assessment. And, some of them pay pretty hefty assessments towards that. And, it can be argued, and I'm not here to start a fight, but, that when you have areas with impervious surface, with roofs, streets, parking lots, that you have accelerated drainage as well. And so a lot of municipalities and cities contribute a lot of water in a very short period of time to a drainage system compared to a farm field that kind of holds the water for a while, goes down through a tile or goes through a waterway and onto a field. What we have to just realize is that we're living in a time that we're getting 5-inch, 7-inch plus rains regularly that we didn't. And when you get 5-inch rains in a day's time, There's nothing in this world that is designed to handle and process that water. And so it becomes tough because everyone says my backyard has water in it. Well, I live 5 miles north of here, and when we get 5 inches of rain, I have no county tile lines around me, no county ditches around me, but I have water problems myself, and that is because you're getting 5 inches of rain in a short period of time, and we're just not equipped to deal with it.
So I have a question for you. So and I do understand why you can't restrict somebody from using those things. Okay, so me as a resident, or would I be able to legally run a tile from my property to the ditch?
If you can get to it,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay.
So then why
Do
are
I-
we just running our water from right down into another watershed? If
Right.
it's just down a mile, yeah, we're just sharing our water with somebody else. But if you can get to it,
Well, no, we
that's
need to stop. Or I just want to
that's
hang it because there is a difference between on county drainage watersheds. You cannot just cross into another county drainage watershed.
another
without-
watershed, not a county. Yes.
Well, right.
Because
that's
if
another
north of here
watershed
is still
without-
Topeka County.
without petitioning into that watershed because the people in County Ditch 27 watershed pay their own assessments for their water. And so, we cannot just divert water from this watershed into that watershed. What's it? Well,
It's our problem that we got from someone.
Yeah. You're
I'm
correct.
I'm not saying that we should develop the ditch. I'm saying, overflow. That's all we're talking about. It's like culverts. Why would you pull out a box culvert when you can stick 2 smaller culverts alongside at the top for overflow, not at the bottom, like we know has happened in town. So the only time water goes through it's when the water's that high.
so, and some of that is, pure hydraulics that,
Mhm.
you can pair the culverts out through town so that there isn't one, but if the channel is too small to take the water,
Right.
it's still going to back up.
And downstream, it's still gonna be a problem for somebody.
And
The
it
quicker
is,
you get it through, the bigger problem it is.
the other thing, and some of the reasons why you don't see as many problems on the west side of town is when you get on the west side of town, there is an incredible amount of natural fall from the west side of town down to Highway 30. There's like several feet of fall, and from the west side of town through the city of Richland, it's minimal, very minimal. It almost takes water to push water through town until it gets to a certain point.
Well, my son lives out on County Road 12. And he had Boot Creek go through the pasture out there. It has gone over the road out
And
there
bear in
because
mind
they
that
do
one
not
thing-
clean out that creek.
Well, okay, and that creek is a public water course, which is overseen by, the state of Minnesota and the DNR. And no one, for lack of better terms, is allowed to alter public water courses without a permit.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just saying that's beyond the county, that's beyond.
But has anybody went to the county to talk to the DNR or the state and say, let's fix that?
Well, so in public water courses, you have some rights to do some minor maintenance to remove dead down diseased trees within it, but to alter a public water course to make it carry more water, is, I'll just say that probably not going to.
In your mind, do you know if they know of that issue?
idea.
They do know of it?
And they have that issue whether it's on Boot Creek, Little LeSueur, the LeSueur, the Blue Earth River. I mean, it's and when we talk about that, it's a problem more of, and I don't necessarily love the word climate change, but, of these large rain events that when you get 10 inches of rain or 7 inches of rain, that's 7 inches of rain. How do you deal with that? it's and
I change the subject. If you go north and if you go south and you're rerouting all this, have you taken into consideration how many farmers' tiles are going to come into there if we get a big amount of rain? Is it going to flood again with the new project?
Into the channel that would be built.
Right.
We've not factored that in, but certainly you're gonna, if you take a channel through a field, you're gonna hit drain tile, and that you would have to maintain their existing drainage on their property. That would be a condition of getting
How
the
much more water do you think you're going to get if you do that, and all the farmers' water's coming into that?
yeah. Well, that would be accounted for in the sizing of that channel that we would construct.
Well, then I think we should look at that before we decide to go the northern route, because if they do the northern route and all the farmers on the sides of that ditch there put more stuff into it, it could be the truth. They ain't doing nothing.
Yeah, both sides.
We need to look at that before we decide.
Yeah.
Before we quit, I want to ask one question. We tried to bring it bridges, make them bigger on the west side or the culvert. Whatever happened that discussion?
So can somebody explain out to me which ones we're talking about? Is it on this end?
Looking on there, what is
One by the funeral home and the locker plant.
First Street, Division.
backed up to go down there, or it is.
We're talking about just a couple through here.
Yeah, this one right here, and probably, right, is that what you guys thinking?
I had a
Or
locker plan and the funeral home.
Funeral home for sure.
yeah, the funeral home's back here. And then you got the
If you make those bigger, the funeral home's gonna be gone, and so is the locker plant because of the amount of how fast the water moves through there.
Locker plant, that home was gone anyway. Numerous times.
So if you
I just wanted to ask that
Yeah.
question.
So there's a couple, orange spots that go through here. So our scenario here with the culvert replacements, we did replace those. It's just the fact that there's not a lot of, build up behind those culverts, behind the current culverts. So they're not holding back a lot of water.
Back then.
What's that?
What's holding the water back then?
Well, size of the channels.
You go on the west side of town there,
right, but there's on the west side of town on County Road 51, there's like a double 7 by 12 box culvert with several feet of fall.
Yeah.
And so, you're doubling the culvert sizes and adding a bunch of grade to it. And so, that's taking the water and that's passing the water. I think, for lack of better terms, through the city of New Richland, every time you come to a culvert, it's like putting a couple sticks on a beaver dam. And, you have a culvert that holds back a little bit of water. Come to the next culvert that holds back a little bit more. And then you take all the grade away from that as well. And that's kind of a combination. And so I think what they're trying to say is just replacing the culverts with bigger ones or removing them altogether still does not solve the problem because there is not enough channel capacity there to take the water because the channel is small and shallow and there's not a lot of grade. What's that?
Did you dig it deeper?
Well, and that was one of the things that Joe had talked about, that in order to dig it deeper, then it has to get wider. And then you have, quite a few structures throughout town that are very close to the channel already that, you'll end up having to either reroute the channel away from those structures or lose those structures. And, and according to their modeling, that just putting in bigger culverts and deepening and widening the channel will still not 100% solve the problem within town.
And we stopped widening the channel. That's the scenario that we actually modeled. I mean, we could have kept going and going, but at some point it's not reasonable, I think, to keep making it wider or deeper. So we kind of stopped at what we thought was realistic and just showed what impact that had.
You were talking about levees and stuff. Now boys threatened to build my side up, but then I would push all the water over 30. So do I got the right to build the levee?
Not an attorney, but
I'm just asking that question.
I'd say if it's going to impact somebody else, no, there would be an issue.
Oh, yeah, there's an issue.
Well, who wants to move to New Richland with all their water, and how many people are moving out of town because of the water in their basements and all?
Well,
Another thought too.
not only that, but you've got neighbors meet, been threatened many times, and you've got the bowling alley who threatened. You know, well, yeah, you've got the school that gets flooded,
Nursing home.
and the nursing home, and I know for a fact that if they get flooded one more time,
That's it.
that it's not closed.
Put a dike around it a long time ago.
I would just like to add is that, you know, that channel through town, whether it be County Ditch 47 or Joint County Ditch 6, at one time years ago, pre 1975, was a natural water course, natural creek.
That
And
was an open ditch up to the school.
what's that?
That was an open ditch up to the school. And at that point, it was a 2-foot concrete culvert that went over and into where 47 is now.
And then that was petitioned.
Yeah, and
into
they
a
put in
county
a
ditch.
6-foot dock,
Right.
6-foot culvert.
Right, and then
So,
made a-
question, that water has to leave before more water comes in, right? So you've got our west end that we don't get near the pressure that we've got on the east end. Well, because it's full, it runs full, no doubt about that. The channel can't take anymore, and 47, with all it does, dump in, and it creates that added restriction because 47 empties out quicker than does the other side. By adding 6 feet of water right at that point. So by changing that over the years, that caused a huge problem on that end because it can't drain out of the east end without the west end flowing. So
Yep.
not that it changes anything. I'm just saying that by adding an overflow of some type in more spots, and you talk about digging this 10-mile or whatever the heck that 4-mile ditch is. You know, why aren't we looking at some type of overflow directly out there, come right down the damn street and go on the other side? I mean,
on the south
so
side.
if you're digging, I mean, is it cheaper to go through a city street, city property, all the way out to where the highway is, and run that culvert underground all the way out and puke it out the other end of town? And talk about distance, you're only what, a mile? And I'm not saying that that's a cheap option either. I'm just saying that you're talking an overflow. You're not talking about getting rid of that creek because you're never going to have it. And all you want to do is get to ease the pressure on the east side to help through town.
Once the creek
Once it comes over Highway 13, then we're in trouble.
Well,
Once it builds up on that side.
once the creek starts going, overflowing the banks at the park, that's, when my backyard starts filling up, because it's all blocked off on the other side of 13.
Well, I think, bringing up your point about, a culvert, an overflow pipe through town. When you talk about how much water that pipe would have to, it would end up in the end, it would be cheaper to dig the diversion around. You can move dirt a lot cheaper than you can put in a pipe of that size.
I don't know, we're something similar to that. And now I should say that you don't have to buy any property other than off the end because it's all public. It's all city street. And it comes directly down straight away. And the water, the elevation drop has got to be, oh man, it's got to be 14 feet, 10 feet. So, but anyways, if you don't relieve the pressure on the east end of town trying to go through, it's not going to change much, is it? So, anyways.
I had a man sit in my front room Thanksgiving and said, I'd sure like to move to New Richland, but God, I don't want your problems. And that's happening.
Well, I mean, my daughter, man, there at my house, she said, I'm not dealing with it. I'm selling it. You're dead. I'm not dealing with any flooding or anything. And I don't blame her.
So if we're gonna make a plan, what are you gonna bring back with deliverable and what time frame? So we can make it fit.
Do you want me to?
Well, that's going to be a topic for the council at the next meeting. Yep.
I think we can talk all night.
Yep. Well, it's going to be a conversation for the council to have because there's going to be a few more dynamics involved, whether it's going to be just a city project or if this is going to be a city county project or what's going to happen because that's going to yeah, no, it has to be a decision that has to be made. So,
Well, I think with other things, with the highways, the state needs to be involved too.
Yeah, I think they should
It's
too.
not that the city and the county, stuff in the state's gotta get in there too.
I don't disagree with you, but I will tell you this, that each time you add an agency, if you're worrying about how fast you want to get this done,
I know.
you can plan to push it out even further and further. So
Since you're adding state up, we apply to the DNR or the city of Richland applies to the DNR for the flood mitigation program. The DNR is a state agency.
yeah. So, but does anybody else? We're getting kind of close to the end of our time. So does anybody else have any last minute questions before we kind of close it out? And obviously we'll stay around for a few minutes to answer any questions if anybody didn't want to answer anything or ask anything in public. But
You guys answer. I am. 50 years ago, it was a ditch mile on the north end of town and went to Boot Creek, 2 miles north of town. Gotta be in the. How big is that tile?
Up on this upper end where it's up on the northwest corner of town, that's County Ditch 32. That's probably only a 10 or a 12-inch tile up on the northwest corner of town.
It's right on the edge of town.
Right, but that is
It was put in with the backhoe.
that is the top end and it drains to Boot Creek. So as it goes northwest to Boot Creek, it gets bigger in size. But I'm saying that up on the edge of the town, it's fairly small in diameter on the upper end of the watershed. And that tile suffers too. We see, when you have these large rain events, that there's actually water pushing out of the top.
Tile was put in about 60 years ago.
We have a lot of tile in the county that are, anywhere from 50 to 100 years old. We have some tile systems within the county that are put in the early 1900s. And, but at that time, when they were put in for, different types of drainage. Everything was not pattern tile. And again, to repeat myself, we also weren't getting big rains regularly like we are now. So
60 years ago, the tile was put in 2 stages deep. Now they go plow, man, 7, 8 feet. 50 feet apart.
no, I understand. I mean, they're, you know,
It's out the gallons of water.
yeah, I understand.
Thank you everybody for coming. Appreciate it.